hope you guys came locked in today because we have a doozy in front of us. It is January 20th, which means that Donald Trump was officially sworn in and inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. He is the second president in U.S. history to serve two non-consecutive terms, and this term has the potential to be infinitely more damaging than the first. There is basically no area of governance that Donald Trump wants to leave untouched. He wants to implement change in every avenue of this country, and he wants to remake the United States of America in his image. And Republicans want him to remake the United States of America in his image. Unfortunately, for folks like you and me, normal people, we are, of course, not going to benefit from any of this. I think the first giveaway is the fact that at his inauguration, sitting on the dais, I think that's how it's pronounced, you had guys like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the three of those guys collectively worth more than 800 billion, and they were actually sat closer to Trump than his cabinet picks, which I think is an excellent foreshadowing of where we are headed as a country. Additionally, they decided to move the inauguration indoors for whatever reason, whether it be for safety reasons, whether it was because it was phenomenally cold in the Northeast and all throughout the Mid Atlantic over the last couple of days. However, him moving this inauguration indoors nullified the tickets purchased by his supporters. So he once again spat directly in the face of the working class people who voted for him. I can't say I'm surprised by these actions. We know he's a con man, he's a swindler, he's a scammer. His shame knows no bounds when it comes to bootlicking and suckling on the toes of guys like Musk and Bezos and other super wealthy individuals. The CEO of Google was sat in the first row as well, but he is worth a paltry $1.3 billion compared to folks like Bezos and Musk, who are multi hundred billionaires. Now, Trump talked about a lot. He touched on a lot of issues during his inauguration. I'm not going to go through one by one because it's everything that I expected. It lacked meaningful substance when it comes to altering the or changing for the better the material conditions of normal working class people. He touched on immigration reform. He touched on making male and female the only two genders recognized by the United States. How that is going to put more money in your pocket, I'm not sure. How that's going to lower the cost of healthcare, I'm not sure. But yeah, just a lot of unsubstantial bullshit. His most compelling policy or his most thought out policy is how he's going to rename the Gulf of Mexico, how he's going to take the Panama Canal, and how he's going to implement these tariffs, all of which are just like none of this is beneficial to anybody. These are all vanity projects. Well, the tariffs would be beneficial to actually nobody. It'd be beneficial to the companies doing the or yeah, no, it wouldn't even be beneficial to the companies exporting. I'm stupid. So I have an article from Politico, and in it is this little highlight of Trump's second inaugural address. This is about 3 minutes long, so we're gonna go through it. We're also gonna look a little bit into the article.
The golden age of America begins right now. A recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. But I felt then and believe even more so now that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
That's so sick. God, God, the Catholic God, the Father of Jesus, picked this man this selfish, narcissistic, hedonist, sexual predator uh, to be president of the United States.
Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
Okay, so for the uninitiated, this is his first step into mass deportation, basically. The Trump plan for mass deportation, and this has been talked about not only by him but by his border czar, Tom Homan, whatever the fuck his name is, how they basically want all of the migrants who live here, the upwards of 10 million migrants, documented and undocumented, that live here, they want to get them the fuck out. Why they want to do that, I don't know. Well, it's because they're racist. That's really the only reason why. But they say they're going to start and only limit it to violent offenders and people who pose a national security risk. People don't have an issue with that, and it's largely why support for mass deportation was anywhere from 50 to 55%. But in that same sentence, they talked about undoing all of Biden's previous legislation and all of his previous protocols on immigration. Even though Joe Biden was one of the most unhinged presidents when it came to border apprehensions and deportations. They there are reports that ICE agents are making their way to quote unquote sanctuary cities like Chicago, New York City, in an attempt to start corralling immigrants and sending them back to whatever country they came from. The ramifications of this would be devastating. You would have whole communities gutted, right? Schools, there's a schools is another portion. There would be like large swaths of classrooms emptied. It is an inhumane policy. It is abhorrent. It is a Hitlerian policy. How do you go ahead and round up all these folks? What do you do with them after you apprehend all of these people? You have to stick them in concentration camps. That's the only way that deportations on this scale would be able to be executed. Is you round up all of these people and you stick them in camps. You concentrate them in camps like they're animals. Beyond the immorality of this situation, it would have horrible ramifications for the economic prospects of local communities, but also of the country as a whole. I hate that the conversation has to boil down to this, but a lot of people they only think in terms of money and monetary value, lost and gained monetary value. Florida implemented a bill like this. I forget when it was. It was within the last couple of years. It barred undocumented migrants from working in the state of Florida. It also banned undocumented migrants from crossing state lines. As you would expect, industries like agriculture, construction, food service, these would all be hit tremendously by the eradication of their workforce. And studies estimated that Florida lost like 10%, or I forget what it was. They lost like billions of dollars off of their state GDP because these industries were not allowed to function. Additionally, migrants pay more into social services than they receive. They pay into Medicare at the same rate as other people, and they actually receive less in Medicare benefits than naturalized citizens. They also pay into Social Security, which, of course, they don't see because they aren't United States citizens. It really is sickening that the Trump administration has fixated so crucially on this because it will have an absolutely disastrous effect on the fabric of this country.
Today, I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will.
I left out as well. He's also coming for birthright citizenship, which means that if your parents come to this country and give birth to you in this country, you're a citizen. You are a United States citizen. You were born here, you live here, you don't know anything of any previous country. He wants to scrap that. I don't know how feasible that is because that is the 14th Amendment. You would have to rewrite the Constitution, which typically lawmakers don't touch. The Constitution they view as a sacred document that cannot be altered. It cannot have things taken away. It can't even have things added to it. Well, I mean, it can. But largely, politicians know that it is career suicide if you go for the Constitution. But these schmucks in Congress, these Republican schmucks, would definitely consider it if Donald Trump really wants to make it happen. They know no shame. They have no convictions. They have no beliefs. They care about Donald Trump probably more than their spouses, I would say.
Drill, baby.
Okay,
So declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast.
Okay. Drill, baby, drill. Why people like this, I don't know. There is this lie. There has been misinformation perpetuated that the United States does not produce oil at a fast enough rate. The reality of the situation is that the United States produces more oil than any other country on earth. 19 million barrels per day of liquid gold, as the CEO of ExxonMobil sees it, come from the oil reserves in this country. Donald Trump likes this because big oil likes this. And big oil has given check after check after check to politicians in DC for decades. Decades. The more that the oil companies drill, the more money that they can make. However, you obviously don't see any benefit to this because the oil production in this country is operated exclusively by private companies. They can do whatever the fuck they want with this oil. And a large portion of the time, they sell it overseas. That's why oil prices are so high here. In addition to, of course, obviously these companies wanted to make as much money as possible. In like a functioning society, in a developed society, the government would own all of these oil reserves. They would own all of these companies. The oil and gas industry would be nationalized, so that way you and me can at least fill up our car for the bare minimum. And if they are going to overcharge for oil, you would get a stipend. This is what happens in Alaska. When oil companies drill up there, the residents get a kickback. They get a check. I don't know how frequent it is. I think it's a couple times a year, maybe like once a quarter. I don't recall the specifics, but they're reimbursed from the oil companies taking their oil. That's how it should function if you're going to be reliant on oil and gas. Obviously, this is antithetical to anyone who's a proponent of green energy like myself. We should not be drilling more. We should be cutting back on oil production when you consider the wildfires that have ravaged Los Angeles, when you consider the fact that it snowed in Texas last week, it snowed in Atlanta last week. When you account for all of the ills that climate change is laying upon us, I don't agree with this. This serves nobody except the oil and gas industry.
Powers at their disposal to defeat powers at their disposal.
Okay.
Drill. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. Instead,
Okay. I'm gonna lose my mind, dude. This video is 3 minutes long. I hate this fucking argument because one, inflation is down. When Joe Biden defenders, when the Brandon Brigade comes online and they talk about how inflation as it stands right now is 2.4%, that's great. That is a normal inflation rate. Inflation is not the problem, however. The prices of goods are the problem. If inflation were 2% as it is every year, but we didn't have COVID, Joe Biden would still be president right now, despite the fact that his brain is leaking out of his ears. But it does people don't give a fuck about inflation when a dozen eggs costs $4. That's the issue. Donald Trump is not going to bring down the price of goods. He said this on multiple occasions. He has also said on multiple occasions that it's going to be hard to reduce the cost of product. He mentioned price gouging early on in his campaign, and then he strayed away from it because Kamala Harris picked it up because it's a good idea. Like, you eliminate price gouging by these corporations. You don't have to necessarily reduce the prices of goods, but you can do what is called a windfall profits tax. This is something that Bernie Sanders has mentioned numerous times, where whenever a company sets record profits, whether it be, you'd probably do it quarter by quarter, you do it, year by year, whatever. Whenever a company records a profit margin above a threshold, the threshold is arbitrary, of course, but whenever they exceed that, the balance that they accumulate gets sent out to the citizens of the United States, kind of like a dividend, right? If you have a stock portfolio, you get a kickback once a quarter or once a year from whatever stock that you're invested in. Do that, but for normal people, because shit is just too expensive right now. People recognize that. They vote with their wallet. And they felt that Donald Trump had the better economy in his first term than Joe Biden had right now. I think that, yeah, it's hard to say which one exactly. Well, I'm not going to say that it's hard to say. Things were cheaper when Trump was in office the first time. But these guys don't have a say in the prices that are set for things. You live in a capitalistic society. The corporations, the producers of goods and services, are going to set the price. The only action that the government has is stepping in and telling them, no, you can't price gouge people. You're a grocery store, you can't have the price of eggs jacked up 37% year over year. That's what the government needs to do. Donald Trump is not going to do that.
Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax our citizens to enrich. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
Not going to work. Ugh. The tariff thing, in particular, for me, is so tired because there is no debate on this. There's not even a fake debate we could have. Tariffs are not going to enrich anybody. If you're unfamiliar, a tariff is a tax that is paid by the corporation importing their goods into the United States. If you're Nike, or not, let's not use a name brand corporation. Let's say you own a clothing store and you have your clothes made in China. It doesn't even matter where it's from. If it's made in China, if it's made in Vietnam, and you import your goods from that country, whatever the tariff is, you pay that to the United States government at the import at the port. The exporter, once your shit leaves their factory, they're done with it. Tariffs are a protectionist economic measure that are utilized when governments want to improve the production capability of a certain sector at home. If you wanted US steel companies to produce more steel, you could put a tariff on steel that comes in from China or Korea or Australia, whatever country. And then you allow companies to invest further in US manufactured steel. But Trump doesn't see it that way, despite literally the economic consensus being that this is only going to make things more expensive for consumers, because he's just putting a blanket tariff on everything that comes from Canada, Mexico, and China. These are normal consumer goods. These are car parts. These are like I think like oil as well. We are very we're not dependent on Canada for oil, but we import a lot of oil and gas from Canada. The importing company pays the tax and then levies that tax onto the consumer. Economists, I can't, what the fuck? Economists generally say that whatever the tariff is what you can expect to pay on top of whatever you're already paying. So if a tariff is 10%, that shirt, those sneakers are going to be 10% more. It's not it's not feasible to levy tariffs when you don't have a manufacturing base in the home country. If we had a robust manufacturing sector here, like we did back in the 20th century, tariffs would maybe be a good idea in certain areas. You also have to remember there are certain things that we just cannot produce here. There are certain goods, certain goods, certain materials that some countries can't produce, and you need to have good trade relations with these countries. But Donald Trump is just not understanding economics 101. He's not understanding tariffs 101. The tariff is a tax paid by the corporation, the importing corporation, and then passed on to the consumer. And not only that, I think it touches on this later on in the article, but these aren't minor tariffs. These are like 30, 40, 50, 60. He wanted to do a 100% tariff on China. Mind you, this is the guy who outsourced 200,000 jobs in his first administration. We do have a little bit more manufacturing capability after Joe Biden's term. I think he onshored like 800,000 jobs, largely due to the CHIPS Act and various other pieces of legislation. But I don't believe that Donald Trump is gonna keep that, or if he does, he's gonna keep it and pretend like he did it when that's not the case.
After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again.
I'm shaking my head. If you're listening to this on audio, I'm shaking my head because this is also just cap. It's really weird that he's lying. I mean, he really, if he didn't lie, he wouldn't have anything to say. You can't go on on TV on inauguration day and talking to all these rich ugly assholes and say that, yeah, I want to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%, and I want to keep I want to make permanent my tax cuts from my original term that largely benefited the 1%. You can't give the game away if you're Donald Trump, right? So understand, Mark Zuckerberg is there, Elon Musk is there. He's not going to say that he's outwardly working to benefit these guys. So he has to lie and say stuff like, I'm going to stop government censorship. It's also easy for him to say that because every major social media platform in the United States has a right wing slant to it, except for maybe YouTube. I would say YouTube is centrist at best. They are relatively unbiased, I guess, but regardless, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg is already he's been snuggling up to Trump. He recently removed fact checking on all of Meta's platforms. Twitter, of course, was bought by Elon Musk, and there are reports out there that potentially boost right leaning accounts. He just met with Zhu Chu, the CEO of TikTok. So we'll see. We will talk about that later on. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was an under the table deal there to, maybe tweak the algorithm a little bit if they manage to find a buyer for the platform, which we will talk about that a little bit later on. But this is the same president who went to Jack Dorsey in his first term and was actively trying to get him to remove things that he didn't like. Joe Biden did the same thing. The fact of the matter is that when you are the preeminent world superpower, as the United States is for at least a couple more years, the empire is coming to a halt. But you are actively trying to control the flow of information. This is why TikTok got banned originally. This is why Donald Trump was the first person to float the TikTok ban. Joe Biden jacked his whole flow word for word, bar for bar. They did not like how how unrestricted the views were on that platform. I'm talking about pro Palestinian coverage. There was someone, I forgot, some Republican dickhead was saying that there isn't enough pro Israel content on there. There isn't enough pro Taiwan content on there. Basically, the United States government was upset that they did not have the ability to reach out to this company and persuade them to potentially alter what they're showing to their users. So it's not a matter of Trump lifting it's not a matter of him lifting or enhancing free speech. It's a matter of enhancing free speech for speech that he likes and speech that is quote unquote American, like pro American propaganda. There is no such thing as truly unmitigated free speech. Everyone knows this. There are hate speech censorships, although not on Facebook anymore. There are, direct threats of violence are not covered under free speech, but the scope of things that we're going to be able to get away with will begin to decrease because America is losing its respect among the global population. This is another issue with Donald Trump that whether he understands it or not, this is just how he is. He is an unstable leader. He's unstable politically, he is unhinged, and when you behave in this way, other countries are wary of doing business with you. When you wake up one day and say you want to ban Greenland or you want to buy Greenland, how do you think Denmark is going to react to that? Moreover, how do you think the rest of the EU is going to react to that? Germany and France both supported Denmark in rebuking Donald Trump's attempted purchase of Greenland. It's not feasible to be this erratic leader. And it's not a surprise that when other world leaders see how the United States disrespects treaties, how they don't observe international law, the international law that they effectively created, how all of the institutions that they created, like the UN, they don't abide by anything they say, how they choose to resort to violence. It's not a surprise that other nations are backing away from being allied with the United States. It's not feasible for them. There's too much risk involved. And when you're a smaller country, you you have to be allied with somebody. That's why the European Union exists. Is this is why BRICS exists and is continuing to add more and more members. Donald Trump is unstable. And people don't like that. World leaders do not like that.
And will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. Something I know something about. This week,
That's just his vendetta with the State Department. He should be in jail right now. Shout out to Merrick Garland for being actually useless as a prosecutor. I will say actual shout out to Jack Smith, who just released his final report on Donald Trump and said that basically this guy was going to jail if we got the case started sooner. There's no such thing as justice for the elite, for the ruling class. They just get to do whatever the fuck they want. And then if you get caught with a little bit of weed, or you get caught with, you know, or you get caught on a gun charge, you're going to jail for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The idea of political persecution is false. It's also, this guy did crime. This guy did crime in multiple areas, whether it was business, whether it was the documents. But when you get away with so much stuff, when you're able to do whatever you want with no consequence, when someone does try to levy consequence on you, you're stunned because no one's ever tried. No one's ever tried. So, but do not get it twisted. This guy will certainly weaponize his Department of Justice to go after his political opponents. It is all self serving bullshit. It is all based in hypocrisy. Clear there is no clear base of values. There is no logical consistency to anything that this guy says. It's all about him. He wants to stop the weaponization of the Justice Department. But yet he has also made it clear that he is seeking retribution in this second term. What does that mean? And if these were unfounded, why would Joe Biden issue preemptive pardons? Which is another story we'll get to. He's going to weaponize the Department of Justice.
I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Dude, they care so much about race and gender and non-binary people and trans people. It's so unnecessary. There are so many ills plaguing this country that are not the result of DEI, that are not the result of trans people existing. They are the direct result of neoliberal capitalist failure. We don't have an 18% increase in homelessness because a black woman got a job somewhere. We don't have people declaring bankruptcy from medical bills because there's a gay man in a position of power at some company. We have this. We have these ills in society because Donald Trump, both as a member of the 1% and also now as the fucking president of the United States, chooses not to address these issues. When you go to renew your passport, you're only going to have two options for the sex category. It's going to be male or female. Before this, you had three. You had one for male, one for female, and one for non binary. This change is symbolic. This is him telling non binary people and trans people that I don't fucking like you. And his hatred for these groups of people exceeds his willingness to help the people who voted for him. This is the whole issue with Donald Trump. He is a hateful, self-serving individual. And he does not care about the people that voted for him. And what really makes me feel for these people is that in some instances, they are the same folks who say that the government does not care about you And yet they have become smitten with this guy who, not once in his inauguration, talked about raising the minimum wage. Not once in his inauguration did he talk about capping the price of prescription drugs. Not once during his inauguration did he talk about improving infrastructure, fixing the one fucking bridge in Bumblefuck, Iowa that's been busted for 13 years. He could make meaningful change, and he never will because, well, we all know why. Because he's a fucking, because he's a, I mean, what president is ever going to make meaningful change? I guess. Anyway, let's go ahead. Let's run that back for a second so I can regain my train of thought.
Be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male.
Oh, that's right. They are so obsessed with race and gender, and yet they keep bringing it up. And they use it to disqualify any person of color, any trans person, any non binary person who does get a position based on merit. It is used as a way to diminish the accomplishments of these people. It is used as another way to otherize them because it doesn't matter how merit based your appointment was, they will never acknowledge it as such. That's the issue with this rhetoric. You could be the valedictorian of your class. You could score a 1400 out of 1600 on your SAT. You could have a 4.3 GPA. And if you're black, Hispanic, non binary, they'll just discount it. They'll say you got into Stanford or Harvard or Yale because you're a minority. Even though, by every objective metric, you were better than 99.9% of the rest of the applicants.
And female. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be.
Peacemaker and unifier, as he legislates against trans people. Peacemaker and unifier, as he talks about taking the Panama Canal, Greenland, making Canada the 51st state, and doing war with Mexico. Peacemaker and unifier, as he threatens to airstrike Iran.
Peacemaker and a unifier. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world.
Do you know what would make the United States the envy of the entire world? Radical populist change. Radical investment in infrastructure. Paying people maybe not even a $15 minimum wage, but a $20 minimum wage. Or giving people 6 months time off like they have in certain European countries. Not treating our prisoners as subhuman. This is stuff that would make other countries envious of the United States. The greatest wealth accumulator in the history of the human race is the United States of America. And what would inspire awe is the appropriate reinvestment of this tremendous wealth to make this country actually the greatest country, to make sure that every person, man, women, non-binary, trans, gay, black, Latino, Asian, to make sure that no matter what they come from, no matter what their starting point is, that they have the opportunity to go to a good school, whether it's a good public school or a public college, which would be free, obviously, and allowing them to excel as a doctor, as an engineer, allowing them to not be saddled by student loan debt, So that way, once they get out of school and they do have this well paying job, that they can build a life for themselves, that they can go out and buy a home and reinvest into their community, and thus building up all of the forgotten communities. So that way, we have an actual middle class in this country. Again, that's what would make the United States the envy of the world. This will not come under Donald Trump. We will be the envy of the autocratic regimes. We will be the envy of Vladimir Putin. We will be the envy of Viktor Orban. They will be envious of one man's ability to suppress the free will of 300 plus million people.
Short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
This is so fucking dumb. How does this get any play? How does this get any motion? This is the lamest thing I've ever heard of. The Gulf of America. What the fuck does that mean? I mean, technically, it is geographically correct because, of course, America is more than just one country. It's two continents, technically. But, like, who gives a shit? It's like, oh, this is the Gulf of Mississippi. Bro, that's fucking whack. Or unless you wanted to name it, like, the Gulf of LeBron. Like, that would be sick. But no, we get the Gulf of America. Meanwhile, like, people can't even get in touch with their fucking insurance company to dispute a claim. This shit is so whack, bro. I can't believe that this dumbass shit gets so much play.
If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback.
No one thought it was impossible. If they thought it was impossible, they're dumb, straight up. Anyone with a not even with like you could have one ear. You don't even need both your ears. If you had one ear and half a brain, you knew that the Democrats were doing everything in their power to make this election as close as possible. When they were discussing the corpse of Joe Biden, the mummy himself, or when they switched it up and went with Kamala Harris, there was nobody who thought that Trump would not be able to win. Even I was not surprised when he won. I thought it was more likely than not that he would lose, and I'll take that L. It's fine. But like no one thought that it was impossible.
But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken.
I want to pause this so it doesn't fucking play during my shit. Okay. So we'll go ahead. We'll just breeze through this article because I'm sure it's gonna touch on. I'm sure it's gonna touch on some stuff that we already heard. This is again once again in Politico. While the orders previewed to reporters ahead of the inauguration and teased in Trump's address made up only a handful of the hundreds of the new administration has pledged to enact in its first days in power, they represent an unprecedented show of executive force and a desire to circumvent Congress in order to reshape everything from the economy to the health services people can access while incarcerated. This is a key point. Since since Republicans do not have supermajorities in the Senate or in the House, they won't be able to enact everything that Donald Trump wants to. They will have to get wacky. They will have to do a lot of stuff by simply non enforcement. But there are avenues for him to do some things. Like, for instance, the tariff issue is one that has to go through Congress. However, there are ways the president can increase tariffs. I think if it's like national security related, but uh, we'll see. There isn't everything that he can do, at least as of yet. We do still have midterms in, well, I guess they'd be next year. That would, that if things continue to go the way they do, would allow Republicans to have significantly more ability to enact change. Speaking to what the fuck? Pared I don't even know what the fuck. Okay. Trump pledged to quote defeat what was record inflation, yada yada, and he vowed to take back the Panama Canal, which the Panamanian government has said is not possible under international law. He also said that China owns the Panama Canal, which is not correct. Um, yeah, I don't know if Panama knows this, but the United States does not give a fuck about international law. I'm not saying that to scare the Panamanians. I hope that Trump doesn't do anything about the Panama Canal, and I hope they keep control over it. But that's not like you. There's a lot of things that we can't do under international law, or even under U.S. law, like send arms to, like send arms to a country committing a genocide, cough cough Israel. But yeah, we still do it. It's not it's not yet known which of Trump's exhaustive list of executive actions will have immediate impact, which are purely symbolic, and whether Congress or the courts can limit their impact. The courts don't give a fuck about anything. So they will probably do whatever Donald Trump wants them to do. It was immediately clear, however, that several appeared to fall short of the days of thunder the incoming president's allies promised in the lead up to Inauguration Day. Despite vows to enact tariffs as high as 100% on imports, for example, Trump issued an order merely directing federal agencies to investigate and address trade deficits and unfair trade and currency practices without levying any tariffs on foreign countries. He did not say this. I mean, he could have said this, but at least not publicly. He's always been the tariff guy. He's been Trumpy tariffs. This is all he gives a fuck about. So I don't know. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth because he knows that he can get away with it. There's not going to be any serious pushback from anybody in his circle or really anyone on the in right wing media. They're just going to sit and nod with their fucking bobbleheads and say, "Yes, sir, whatever you say, sir." The order, first previewed by the Wall Street Journal on Monday, singles out China as well as Mexico, Canada, and Mexico. I can't read. I'm illiterate, I think. As well as Canada and Mexico for evaluation, but does not impose either a universal baseline tariff or tariffs on select trading partners, as many countries feared. Again, the tariff conversation has been so wishy-washy over the course of his campaign that it's always like led to this. There's no way that people in his inner circle would think that universal baseline tariffs would be a good idea, even though he's going out and constantly fucking talking about it. This contradicts Trump's promise in November to impose 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Again, they probably looked at him and said, Mr. President, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we have a free trade agreement with these countries, a shitty free trade agreement, by the way. And there are two of our three biggest trading partners. Why would we do this? This decision is likely to irk backers of the hawkish tariff agenda Trump outlined in his campaign trail, which started 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports, tariffs of 60% or higher on Chinese imports. Blah, 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 blah. His defining issue, immigration. Trump will issue 10 executive orders. He will attempt to end birthright citizenship, a move that would exclude the children. Okay, we talked about this. Trump's order will also increase immigration of. Oh my god, dude, I'm fucking cooked. What is going on? Trump's order will also increase immigration enforcement. Authorities declare a national emergency at the southern border and so-called catch and release policies that allow migrants parole while awaiting their court hearings. That's just inhumane. Like, we should not have pre-trial detention in any way, shape, or form. And the Lake and Riley Act, it just took this a step further by saying that you don't even have to be arrested or convicted of a crime. You merely just have to be accused of a crime and they can detain you. And yet these are the same folks that talk about how Rikers Island is a disaster. It's a disaster because of its inhumane conditions that are the result of too many detainees, too many pre-trial detainees. Resume construction of the border wall and move to resurrect remain in Mexico, a policy from his first term that required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their cases to be processed. He also plans to, quote, clarify the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States and direct agencies to provide recommendations for the suspension of entry for nationals of countries of concern. He will also suspend refugee resettlement for at least 4 months. Other executive actions included directive to further restrict asylum using 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act and designating a series of drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This one is particularly insidious because this is his pathway to bombing Mexico. This is not hyperbole. This is not hyperbole. I'm not embellishing anything. Donald Trump wants war with Mexico under the guise of going after the cartels because the cartels are responsible for fentanyl and weapons being trafficked into the United States, even though the weapons are made by American companies and most of, like 90% of the fentanyl that comes into the United States is coming in through natural born US citizens. And he will also direct the Attorney General to seek capital punishment for the murder of law enforcement and capital crimes committed by undocumented immigrants. This is also insidious. Capital punishment should not exist. It is barbaric. It is cruel and unusual punishment. There are instances where the right person doesn't get put to death, and that is one of those instances is too many. We should not be killing people for their crimes. Quote, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. Migrants account for a staggeringly low amount of crime. You are more likely to have a crime committed against you by a natural born U.S. citizen. Of all of the homicides that take place in this country, and unfortunately there are a lot of them because we are a massive population, undocumented immigrants have committed only a couple dozen. Is a couple dozen too many? Of course it is. But when you compare that to the amount of crime committed by natural born US citizens, it pales in comparison. There's no reason to talk about criminal justice reform and only limit it to people who are coming into this country. If you are serious about bringing down the crime rates, which have been steadily declining for the last couple of decades, you will tackle this for what it is. It is a poverty problem. It is a societal problem. It is a failure of the government to provide adequate social safety nets and adequate opportunity to people living in impoverished neighborhoods. With Monday's executive orders, the incoming president hopes to send the message that the border is closed to illegal crossings and that anyone living in the U.S. unauthorized, especially those who have committed crimes, will be deported. Those living in the U.S. unauthorized will be deported. It's not just criminals, guys. It is all foreign born people. Not even all foreign born people. It's really just Latinos because there was the whole debate about the fucking H-1B visas, the HB1 visas. I don't fucking know what it is. But those are quote unquote the good immigrants when you talk to Elon or you talk to Vivek Ramaswamy. Those immigrants are fine because we can exploit them. Well, they also exploit these immigrants as well. So the whole system is fucked. The whole system needs reformation, but this is the wrong type of reformation. But it sets up a challenging and pivotal period ahead for the White House and Republican allies in Congress, as the party's immigration agenda will no doubt face a number of legal and logistical hurdles. Another order focused on the domestic front targets programs that promote DEI. God, this shit is so tired. May Davis Mailman, the former head of the conservative Independent Women's Law Center, who also served in Trump's first administration, told reporters it was very fitting, quote, very fitting, to announce on Martin Luther King Day an executive action to dismantle the DEI bureaucracy. And this includes environmental justice programs. They just list a bunch of stuff. Invoking King to tout the end of diversity programs is likely to infuriate civil rights activists who support these programs and often point out that King fought for economic as well as racial equality. Yeah, guys, Martin Luther King was pretty left wing, and that's probably why the CIA was telling him to kill himself, or not the CIA, the FBI. That's probably why they were telling him to kill himself because he was too left wing for them. He was too based for them. The elimination of DEI is it's fucking silly. You talk about meritocracy, you talk about how You want everything to be merit based, but then as soon as black and brown people and women and gay people start showing merits that supersede that of white people, they're like, actually, no, this is a bad idea. You can't. Well, I mean, they can do whatever the fuck they want because when you have no morals and you're a dumbass, that's basically how you exist. But DEI, it's not doing anything. It's just allowing people to be considered for a position that they should be considered for anyway. Trump also plans to sign a broad order to roll back programs that recognize transgender and non binary individuals. This will directly lead to blood being on Donald Trump's hands. This group of people, trans individuals, have the highest rate of suicide among any group of people. Not only are you taking away their personhood, you're also attempting to take away their right to get the appropriate medical care that they want and that they need. It's not that hard. Allow people to be themselves. Stay out of people's personal business. You, as the government, literally, Donald Trump is the government. You have no right to directly legislate against these individuals. In practice, Mailman told reporters Trump's team also previewed a broad order to roll back programs that recognize transgender and which Mailman characterized as, quote, defending women from gender ideology extremum and restoring biological truth to the federal government. You guys are lawmakers. You're not scientists. You don't know shit about biology. I'm not a fucking biologist either. But I at least listen to the people who are experts in this field. You know, if a doctor, if a fucking trained medical professional is allowing someone to proceed with this, I think it's in their best interest. Do you know why? Because the smart medical professional said so. Right? Multiple medical professionals, actually, because you have doctors, you have psychiatrists. There are many, many smart people who assist in giving trans people care. If they don't see any issues with it, and it will allow these folks to lead happier, more fulfilling lives, why is the government stepping in? This is small government conservatism. That was sarcasm, obviously. But like, this is the type of stuff that conservatives always bitch and moan about liberals doing and leftists doing. Oh, you guys want big government. You guys want the government to be in everyone's business all the time. Meanwhile, like, this is happening. In practice, she said the order will mean barring any options other than male and female on government documents, including passports, and excluding trans people from gender segregated spaces that take federal funding, including prisons, migrants housing, and domestic violence shelters. It is so sick when the government inflicts violence on its domestic population. The Trump administration will also seek to eliminate restrictions on so called conversion therapy, a practice intended to persuade young trans people to reject their identity. This is sick shit. Quote, a government entity telling a therapist that they can't speak the truth that a boy is a boy, that sort of ban has no place in our country. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Conversion therapy is opposed by medical groups like the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychology. Oh, okay, okay. It will allow therapists to. Oh my god, I'm so fucking dumb. This is just gay conversion therapy, but for trans people. I hate these motherfuckers, dude. I literally despise the assholes who exist in this capacity. This is so sickening. It is so heartless. It is so just unsettling that these government people, these small government believers, want to inject themselves into not only that, these are children. These are children. These are children that they want to involve their lives in. Why do they insist on being so close to children all the time? It's so weird. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry argue it is both scientifically unsound and harmful for mental health. Gay conversion therapy did not work. Trans conversion therapy is not going to work. The point of a therapist is to work out whatever someone is feeling about whatever subject. It's not the therapist's job to convince them of something. It is the therapist's job to assess their situation and provide the appropriate diagnosis. If they have a patient who is trans and this patient is having suicidal ideation, they're not going to push this child closer to killing themselves. That's inhumane. That's medical malpractice. Additional guidance will be coming from Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi, who is yet to be confirmed by the Senate, to ensure this order complies with the Supreme Court's ruling that Title 12 of the Civil Rights Act protects transgender workers from discrimination. There are also states like New York State, or fuck the states. It's also people, the voters who have had direct ballot measures on expanding their respective states' constitution to include additional marginalized groups like the state of New York, like Prop 1 that I voted yes on, because I feel that these people should be protected by the Constitution. It is in no one's interest, it is no one's business other than them and their doctors to figure out what is best for their situation. Whether the administration will be able to implement these orders, however, remains to be seen. The Trump transition was plagued by self-inflicted delays in hiring and coordinating with career federal workers and outgoing Biden officials, and his long pledge to slash the federal workforce needed to carry out rules and policies. Many Democratic attorneys general, I fucking hate that phrase. By the way, it should be attorney generals. I don't care. I don't care. And advocacy groups have also pledged to challenge the orders. We're almost at the end here. In a move that could bolster these efforts, the progressive legal group Democracy Forward issued 75 public record requests Monday to uncover how the incoming administration coordinated with GOP state officials, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, and the Department of Government Efficiency group run by mogul Elon Musk to prepare the blitz of executive orders. And then we have a quote from them. Whenever I discuss the upcoming Trump administration with folks who are not so political, whether they're apolitical or they just don't know, I talk about the potential harm that it could do and how it has the potential to be one of the most harmful administrations of any American president ever. His agenda is insidious. His agenda serves to further marginalized people while enriching the oligarchy that he is building around him. He has no interest in populist economic reform. He has no interest in implementing measures that his base in deep red states have voted on, whether it's in Missouri, whether it's in Kansas. He is a self-serving prick. He wants to line the pockets of his corporate donors and he wants to line the pockets of, again, the billionaires and the CEOs that he has surrounded himself with. However, the one saving grace we have is that he is so dumb and his administration is also filled with countless dumbasses that there is the potential for not only just incompetence, but also infighting, which would be fantastic. We're going to see our first glimpse of this is probably going to be TikTok because Trump wanted to bring TikTok back. Tom Cotton, senator of Arkansas, does not believe that TikTok has any place in the United States. And at the time of this recording, that is his stance. As we know, however, Republicans who go against Trump do not have the longest shelf life, at least in his good graces. Generally, non-Trump candidates perform better in local elections than Trump extremists, but in Congress is where it matters. You just need a few spiteful Republicans as well as the Democrats, and he really cannot pass anything. However, his team is going to work exceptionally hard to skirt the process and to implement these measures by any way possible. They have an extensive team of lawyers looking at just loopholes that they can extort. So I don't know how bad it's going to be. I think it's going to be devastating, but there is the chance that it's not as devastating as I believe it is, and that's probably because I am much more cynical in terms of politics than probably the average person. I am also way more involved than the average person.